Okay, I'm gonna make you the host. Okay, you should be good now. I'm gonna leave though, and let's
Okay.
make sure it still works, okay?
Okay. Yeah, it should be fine. I think so.
Hello, Bean.
Jenny.
Am I too early? Is it supposed to start at 6:30?
Yeah, we basically just opened it early in case any of the guest speakers like wanted to. We just basically left it as like a buffer period in case they wanted to come in and clarify anything.
Okay, should I leave and come back then?
It doesn't matter. If you want to stay, that's fine. If you want to come back in a little bit, it's up to you.
Okay, I'll just probably stay and just mute myself.
That's fine. Hey. Hey guys.
Hey.
How are you guys today?
Hello.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Can't complain. A little nervous, but excited.
I feel like, yeah.
This is like probably like the most people that we've ever had signed up for like one of our virtual events, so exciting.
Oh, wow.
But I really like how the presentation came together. Everything on you guys' slides looks great, so I think it's gonna go really well. I ended up leaving the Zoom, like basically made it to last up to 2 hours. I don't really expect that we'll probably do the full 2 hours, but I just thought I would give it time just for us to have like extra little bit in the beginning, and then also in case, yeah, just depending on how the discussion goes. Hey y'all, Elena's here.
Hello.
Oh, me and Tristan were wondering, like, are you guys gonna be controlling the slides, or do we also get like?
So what I was thinking was I would just, screen share from my computer the whole time, but I want to be able to, make sure that everything is good with everyone and in the chat and whatnot. So I think what we're going to do is just have people screen sharing when they are giving their talks so that they can like navigate through their slides. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
Should we
Tristan,
switch off? Or do you want to short shift?
Can you control the slides?
Yeah, that's good.
Very
Then I'll
cool.
just do that. And then when I pass it on to you, just tell me when.
Yeah, I'll let you know when to pass on to the next slide.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, other than that, everything looks really good on your guys' slides, and I'm very excited to hear what you guys have to say. I didn't really, like super in depth investigate everybody's material because I kind of wanted to be able to, enjoy the presentation for myself as well. So exciting.
Hi.
Hey, dude. What's
Hey.
up?
Mom's here too. Mom's here too.
Hey, Mama Burke.
Hi, Lenny. Hi, Penny. Mwah, mwah. Okay, we'll be quiet now.
Everything. Yeah, 5 minutes.
Hold on, I'll be right back.
Yeah, Citlalli, if your mom wants to, she should be able to access it. I'm pretty sure that the link is made to be like accessible to anybody that has it.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just wanted to make sure because I saw it was like through UIC, so I don't know if they. But if you like selected it like before you made the meeting, then I think we should be fine.
Yeah, I think it should be fine. And I basically, you know, I had everyone using that registration form because we were like, you know, publishing information about the event in a bunch of different places, and so I wanted to make sure that people would have a way to get access to the Zoom, even if they weren't, you know, like affiliated with our club. But yeah, it is the event is open to the public.
All right, cool. Cool.
Hi, Rosa, welcome.
I think you fell.
How are you?
You're good. How are you?
Doing good, thank you.
I can't tell if that is a Zoom background or if you're actually on campus, but I'm gonna assume that it's a Zoom background.
It is, yeah, that's the mural at the LCC.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that mural.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you guys something. Just for like my own research purposes. But have you guys ever heard of the Chicago Sanitarianship Canal?
A little bit, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I think there is I think that Thomas is going to be talking about that, isn't he, Frank?
Yeah, I think I might have seen something in the slides
Yeah.
somewhere.
Cool.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're gonna take a little bit more time for everybody to filter in, but for now, just we'll probably give it, you know, a couple more minutes. But thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Really excited to get started. This is Penny and Elena. We're coming from the same computer right now, so whenever you see Penny Burke on your screen, that could be either one of us, but we'll try to identify ourselves. I know our last speaker is still on his way. He might have gotten turned around the links. Oh, okay. He should be getting in now. Hi, Drita. Hi, Edwin.
Hi.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Edwin. How you doing? Nice picture.
Thanks. It's very flattering.
Mads.
Hey, Mads.
Hey, Thomas.
Hello.
Hey, Rachel. Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
All right.
You're just coming in. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're
We're gonna
welcome.
take a couple more minutes to allow everybody to arrive, and then we'll get the show on the road. Layla, just so you know, I think the control transferred over to you when you joined the session.
Okay. Okay, hold on. Let me make you host again. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, you should have it now.
Yeah, we're good. Thanks. So just allowing a few more people to come into the session, but I think we'll get started at 6:35. Okay. Hi, Manny.
Hey, Penny.
Hi, Tati. Thanks for coming.
Hey.
Hello.
Okay. Since it's now 6:35, I think we're gonna get the show on the road. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming out. There's a lot of new names and faces that we're seeing as I'm scrolling through everybody here, so that's really exciting. Thank you again so much for joining us today. We're also very happy to be having a incredible guest panel of speakers who are going to share a lot of awesome information with you today. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to start my screen share. If you didn't already know, this is an event for Students for Animal Liberation. We're an organization on campus at UIC. We've been operating virtually all year. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks
Yeah.
everybody. Guests, is everybody ready to go? Rosa, Thomas.
Yeah, we're
Yes,
ready.
we're ready.
All right, great. Okay. So we want to start by delivering a land acknowledgement, simply to acknowledge the fact that the University of Illinois Chicago resides on the traditional territories of the three Fire Peoples. Forgive my pronunciation, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. The area was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for more than a dozen other
I think your mic cut out.
Chicago is a city and still thriving here today. As we work, live, and play on these territories, we must ask what we can do to right the historic wrongs of colonization and state violence and support Indigenous community struggles for self-determination and sovereignty. And as we talk about environmental injustice today, we find it very important to lay the foundation that Indigenous peoples were the first victims of such an injustice in this land. So now we're very excited to introduce you to all of the speakers today. And we'll start with, ourselves. We're the leaders of Students for Animal Liberation. Elena.
Hello all, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our collaborators. I'm Elena Kobashi. I'm a third-year undergrad student at UIC. I major in Earth and Environmental Science, and I'm currently planning on pursuing soil science. And I want to work to kind of recreate our understanding of our connection to our land and production of goods. Yeah, so this event is very important to me and pertains to a lot of the work that I wish I'm lucky enough to do in the future. So yes, thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Penny. My gender pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a junior at UIC, and I also study environmental science, and I'm also minoring in biology. I've been involved with SAL since it was formed in 2018, and I've had the privilege to be a member and secretary and now president of the club. And it's a really awesome organization that has evolved a lot since I got involved with it. And it's been, like a really amazing and also trying experience to, raise it as an organization. And basically my goals as an individual are to do whatever I can to improve conditions of life for people and the landscape and all of the life within it. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And now we'll hear a little bit more about our guests.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this panel. I am Rosa Cabrera, pronouns she, her, and hers. I am consider myself to be a cultural worker. I'm an artist, educator, and I'm the director of the Rafael Tristen Ortiz Latino Cultural Center at UIC, better known as the LCC. Among different interests that I have for this particular panel today, I saw that I would emphasize my research and practice work that mostly focuses on understanding environmental and climate change problems as a social issue. And how this works within larger system of powers and privilege that, as we all know, has historically produced unjust environmental and climate conditions for communities of Black people, Indigenous people of color, immigrants, and low-income residents. And also, I'm very interested in using methodologies for public engagement that are centered on the arts and humanities to harness first voice stories and community knowledge in order to create cultural relevant and place-based solutions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosa.
All right. Hi, I'm Citlalli Trujillo. I'm a fourth year biochemistry student and an undergrad researcher with Las Ganas. I'm part of the Freshwater Lab, where I am a key participant in a digital storytelling site on Chicago's water infrastructure and the Chicago River. I'm also conducting community-based research on industrialization and lack of green space around the South Branch to further highlight environmental racism, disinvestment, and development.
Hi, I'm Tristen Ortiz. I'm completing my undergrad in English at UIC. I've been a member of the Freshwater Lab since 2019. At the Freshwater Lab, we combine the sciences and humanities to provide a broad look and detailed look at how we view our water and how we can reimagine it in a better way. Currently, we're working on the Backward River, which is our latest venture, which tackles the issues affecting the Chicago River. And there I was a writer, and I wrote The River Speaks, which is a multi-part narrative personifying different parts of the river to give voices to issues that you might not hear about.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And Thomas?
Hi, yes. I'm Thomas Frank. I am an artist organizer. Right now I'm an art instructor here at the HAPA program. It's the Hammond Academy of Performance and Arts. I've used to be in medical education for about a decade and then urban planning. And that's how I landed here in Northwest Indiana. I'm originally from Chicago. And that's where I, discovered my kind of baptism in the environment and also urban planning. I'm going to be talking about a lot about our toxic culture and the effects on working class communities like the Southeast Side in East Chicago, Indiana, and the economically disparaged communities of color that are along this rim, the southern rim of Lake Michigan, and also a little bit about our culture of resistance.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. And thanks all to our whole panel for giving some background. Now we will continue with the presentation.
So just to offer some kind of baseline definitions of the motif of this event, we're not going too in depth about the definitions about these because we feel as though the information we're about to present, especially with our guest panel, is going to give a very clear image as to what this concept means, especially as it manifests in the city. But environmental racism is referring to the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on people of color or marginalized groups. And environmental injustice is the lack of recognition and distribution of resources and aid to communities that are disproportionately impacted by these environmental hazards that we are about to discuss.
Okay. I don't know what happened to our rules slide, realizing that it's no longer there. Okay, so it looks like we might be missing one of our slides that we had intended on prefacing with. It was basically just a slide that outlined kind of like some guidelines for the presentations. So important things to know is that as you probably heard when you came into the session, that this talk is being recorded, just as a preface, and we do intend to post the recording, and also we will be sending out a PDF copy of the slides after the presentation. So in case you don't make it all the way through for whatever reason, there will be information to follow. And with that, we also ask that you save your questions for the speakers or about any of the topics that we cover till the end, where there will be a discussion period. If for whatever reason, like I said, you have to, head out a little earlier, that's totally fine. Please stay for whatever you are able to stay for. And you can send an email to Students for Animal Liberation, UIC@gmail.com. I'll put that email in the chat momentarily. I'm not sure how we lost that slide, but If anyone has any questions, we ask that you please save it to the end. Or if you have any technical issues, you can send me a message in Zoom and we will try to help you with that as best as we can. And is there anybody that is having any type of audio or video issues at the moment? If you could verbally let us know, that would be great. Okay, cool. Little side convo there, but forward. So I just want to before Elena.
I'm sorry. I don't know if this is just me, but I can't really hear anything.
Sorry?
Were you just speaking? Was that my fault?
What'd you say?
Oh, it seems like we lost your audio for a second.
Oh, okay. Did you hear me start the beginning of this slide?
No.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Mads. So yeah, throughout the history of the city, the Chicago has served as a home for a lot of marginalized groups of people, and these people have been those who have worked tirelessly to build this city and make it what it is. So today we want to, acknowledge that we recognize that the best part of this city is its diversity, and we, strive to work towards finding solutions for these groups of people who have, continuously served and made this city what it is. So with that, Elena and I intend to lay a very basic information out about the status of environmental racism in Chicago, and by no means are we here to address everything that is to be addressed, but we just kind of want to be able to provide a good general overview. So when we talk about the past of the city, there's a lot that can be said about industry. So this city was basically founded by a man named Jean-Baptiste du Sable, and this was obviously a settlement, not an indigenous formation. But he basically came to Chicago to establish a farm and a trading post on Lake Michigan, where the area was populated by multiple indigenous groups. So after his arrival, there were various efforts of colonization and settlement that took place, ultimately displacing many indigenous groups. And after the exploration of Marquette, Joliet, and du Sable, the indigenous settlements in Chicago became very vulnerable. So there was the establishment of trading posts on the lake where the animal fur trade and some other trades did take place, but basically what is considered to be the first industry of Chicago is fur trading. It was foundational for economic development and progress industrially for the city throughout the 1800s. The photo here shows Fort Dearborn, which was established to be able to provide protection and a central point for the fur trade to take place. So some of the techniques of this first industry later lent themselves to the development of the meatpacking industry, which we will give you more information about in the next slide. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge some kind of sad and unfortunate origins of our city. Is that this is a city that was built on the suffering of innocent people and innocent animals. So I guess it's not really all that surprising, all of the injustices that have unfolded after that kind of unfortunate foundation.
And then some background on the metal manufacturing and energy production of the city's history. So iron and steel mills have been most economically prominent in Chicago since before the Civil War. During the 1800s, Chicago was one of the world's leading steel production centers. And during the industry boom, companies moved to remote sites with abundant land and cheap property and easy access to water. And large plants were built in Southeast Chicago. which has been historically home to a considerable portion of the Black and Latinx population. Um, so some environmental impacts that follow this industry are a slew of emissions, one of which was abundant during this time was coke, which refers to a heated and basically carbonized coal. There were also ammonium compounds and sulfur and coke dust, amongst other things, being emitted. There was also a lot of water that was used to cool the coke during production after baking, which obviously seeped a lot of contaminants into water supply. There was also an abundance of slag, which refers to a type of waste which is basically a limestone and iron ore impurity, and it collects at the top of molten iron. And there was also a lot of metal dust from electric arc furnaces, which can cause a slew of respiratory diseases, lung illnesses, and cancer, amongst many other things. So interestingly, gaslighting did exist within the US in the early 1800s, but majority of Chicagoans obtained all of their energy from coal until the 1850s. And although the emissions from the burning of coal was impacting everyone who was using it across urban and rural regions, the production of coal was and is particularly affecting marginalized communities in a more complex and harmful way. And in terms of the top industry exports today, the top 5 major exports are medical instruments, pharmaceutical products, electronics, industrial machinery, aircraft, spacecraft, which implies a high presence of war in our habitat. And this goes to show that Chicago has an extremely complex history with environmental injustice that in large part manifests itself in the geological life of this land through the phases of industrialization. This mode of racism has unjustly resulted in the poisoning of the water, air, and soil that exists within the homes of marginalized groups within the city of Chicago. We'll go to the next slide.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, I will be telling you guys a little bit about Chicago's history as a meatpacking industry. So Chicago's meatpacking district opened in 1865. This was, at the time, they were considered to be basically the authority on meatpacking facilities and technology. So this was the biggest meatpacking center in the world and was considered, like a nation center. And the progression of meatpacking industry began with European colonizers bringing cattle and hogs to North America. And at that time, they would let them forage in the woods and they would then slaughter them as necessary. But commercial butchering began when population increased in towns. And this activity was conducted on the outskirts of town. You all know what that means. To alleviate the problem of driving cattle and hogs through the city streets, and leading packers and railroads incorporated on the Union Stockyard and Transit Company starting in 1865. So you can see the photo there, that is the Union Stockyards. So effectively they went from having it be more of a central practice to being in what is now the Chicago South Side. So with that, obviously, this was a time before there were a lot of, regulations for workers' rights, and, being involved in the daily routine of killing, often brutally, animals is something that is very traumatizing and an extremely difficult job to do. So conditions were unsanitary, they were unregulated, and very unsafe. Add into the equation long hours, low wages, and a lot of child workers, many of them between the ages of 8 and 11 years old. So yeah, this was kind of a nightmare from all angles. And so these workers were often immigrants. They often lived in tenement homes. And these facilities were often, apart from these larger stockyards, they were sometimes, several story facilities. And so there were a lot of different hazards in these buildings. And the the railway industry that also was rooted in Chicago centralized this whole process and allowed the transport of a lot of meat products in and out of the city, and that allowed them to even export them out of the country and into Europe in some cases. So one of the biggest ways that this industry was exposed to the world was from the publication of a 1905 book called The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair. It's a pretty famous book. Effectively, what happened was this author went undercover into a meatpacking facility where he worked, and he wrote this narrative based on his experience. And I would like to show a video that kind of provides a little bit of more context about the climate of the city at this time and the ways that this book impacted the industry. But I just want to give a warning right now that there is some graphic imagery and description of animal slaughter. This video is approximately 3 minutes long, so if you do not want to watch that, you can go ahead and just zone out and mute everything for the next about 3 minutes. I'm going to go into that now. Does everybody see the tab coming up?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear everything okay?
On the morning of February 10th, 1906, as Wiley was busily preparing for the coming battle in Congress, the American
Can you guys hear?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
public woke shocking headlines about a scandal within the meatpacking industry. Newspapers were filled with stomach-churning details of the filthy conditions of Chicago's largest beef companies, as described in a damning new book called The Jungle by novelist Upton Sinclair. Sinclair had spent nearly 2 months working undercover, documenting the inhuman labor practices and unsanitary conditions on factory floors. Stories of rat infestations, widespread contaminated and diseased carcasses, and even of human appendages finding their way into processed meat and onto grocery store shelves.
The Jungle was not written as an argument for safe food legislation. It was written as an argument on behalf of workers' rights, but it had unintended consequences. There were a number of scenes in the novel about rats, getting into the meat, being turned into sausage, about how filthy the conditions were, and Americans were eating a lot of meat.
There were stories of people distracting the inspector who was there to check for tuberculosis in cows, so that cows that they knew were tubercular could just be passed through and end up in the cooling cars.
The book describes mold-covered meat that's washed off in a bath of borax and then goes back into the food supply. The walls are scummy with rotting meat that is dried and blood spattered and germs are growing everywhere.
You have the fresh cuts of meat on down to like the pieces of meat on down to the scraps of the pieces of the spoiled meat, and they're all going into different products and being canned and sold to different populations who are completely ignorant of what is or isn't going into their food.
It was a portrait of an industry run amok, an extremely worrying depiction of America's food supply that transfixed the country. I aimed for the public's heart, Sinclair recalled, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, very intense. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack from that video, but ultimately, obviously, there are a lot of different regulations and workers' rights that are in place today. But at the end of the day, the types of exposure that people that work in these industries are exposed to is still much of the same. And there were I read so many different articles about different types of health consequences that arose from this type of work, from the people not just that were working but also consuming these products. It was really, really horrible. There's no way to estimate how many people were made sick or killed by this industry. And unfortunately, there was not ultimately tons of success to finding justice for the people that were doing these jobs. There were a series of strikes that took place, and ultimately the efforts of this organizing was overshadowed by the First World War at a certain point in time. And just to kind of wrap up this topic, obviously we can see from the video that this was a nightmare situation, not just for animals, but for the people that were working there. And when you consider that many of these people were children, it is nearly unbearable to imagine the physical and mental trauma that they might have sustained. And to provide some perspective on today's conditions, this profession is usually made up by Latinx, Black, and Asian workers with an average salary of $22,000 a year, often with no access to any type of mental health treatment for any type of trauma that may unfold from this profession. In the 1999 Bureau of Labor Statistics report, meatpacking was determined to be the most dangerous occupation in America. Okay, next slide.
Thank you, Penny. That was very well said. So just some highlights of some significant manifestations of environmental injustice in our city today. So as I'm sure a decent amount of you know already, a large portion of Chicago's infrastructure was built with lead products, which has obviously led to the severe poisoning of a large portion of our water reservoirs and soil ecosystems. This issue has largely been neglected by political leaders and, of course, is exacerbated within the presence of industrialization. This image on the bottom right is depicting a metal recycling company on the east bank of Calumet River that produces a lot of pollution to surrounding neighborhoods, and it's also close in proximity to already existing plants that have plans to merge with General Iron. Another instance is Little Village's Crawford coal burning power plant that retired after already having killed hundreds due to its emissions and waste production, only to be bought out by the Hillco redevelopment partners who built a warehouse that houses hundreds of diesel trucks. More recently, the Department of Housing and Urban Development is attempting to relocate a recycling facility, General Iron, from Lincoln Park to a southeastern Chicago neighborhood. And interestingly, I found this article talking about how these threatened neighborhoods experience higher temperatures generally due to the pollution of industrialization and the contaminants that are in the atmosphere that perpetuate positive feedback loops and increase temperatures. And there have been quite a few deadly heat waves in the recent past that have contributed to the deaths of hundreds of people. And it was interesting because this study said that during a heat wave, every 1 degree increase in temperature can increase the risk of dying by 2.5%. So this just goes to show how even this a little goes very far, especially when it comes to all of these extremely powerful forces of nature that we are neglecting and harming and polluting, and it's becoming extremely deadly, and it's only going to continue to get worse and worse. That's the thing about the environment and the ways in which the consequences are manifesting. It kind of is exponentially becoming worse, especially with climate change. Yes, weather problems and events are very crucial and important right now. And so this is a major point of concern, especially with the future of confronting and grappling with environmental injustice.
Thanks, Leila. Okay, so it has been said in many sources that Chicago has been called the most segregated city in modern America. Just to provide some clarity on some of these, the specifics of some of these more impacted communities, we wanted to lay out some very general characteristics of what a environmentally and environmentally racist neighborhood may look like. So you would possibly see the severe segregation of and isolation of Black neighborhoods, a lack of green spaces and outdoor resources, for example, community gardens. These neighborhoods may be characterized by a lack of resources necessary for well-being, and with that also an abundance of pollution and many industrial facilities. Many can be labeled as food deserts, and in transitional neighborhoods, there is a looming presence of gentrification. So some specific examples include in East Chicago, you could say East Chicago, Indiana, also the whole Calumet River area, South Chicago Heights, Hegewisch, and Irondale. And then on the south and west side, Little Village, Pilsen, Altgeld Gardens, South Lawndale, Brighton Park, Armour Square, and McKinley Park, just to name a few. This is a really cool graphic. At the end of our presentation, we have a whole list of resources that you guys can check out. And this is an interactive map of the worst pollution in various neighborhoods, with the warm colors being the worst affected. Okay, so with that, we are going to transition into our guest speakers. So if that's okay with you, Rosa, I'm going to stop my share and let you take over so that we can take a look at what is going on in Zoom. You should have the ability to select screen sharing at the bottom.
I can. Maybe you can just, I can tell you when to pass the slide. I only have 4, so it should be easy.
Does anybody else see the option to screen share at the bottom of their screen? Just out of, no.
It's disabled.
Yeah.
Oh no. Well,
you might have to give her the host option, and then she can give it back to you after.
Okay. I don't know if I can do that. Let's see.
It says that Layla has host access.
Sorry,
Oh, yeah.
what did you say?
That Layla is the host.
Okay.
I might still have. Okay, so wait. Who's screening? Who am I trying to like give options to again?
Oh, Rose.
Okay, I won't be able to do it, Penny. If you go to the top right corner, there's 3 dots on their screen, and then you click on it on their box.
Yeah, I don't see that.
I also have an option to screen share, but I don't have the option to hand it over to you.
You know, I'm okay with you controlling the PowerPoint. I can just tell you when to go to the next slide, if that's easier.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I thought I enabled the setting for anybody to be able to screen share.
That's weird. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that's okay. All right. Okay. All right. Take it away. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you for doing this. I appreciate Elena and Penny providing us with some of the historical context, tracing the legacies of neglected environmental racism in our city. For the purpose of highlighting how environmental and climate justice or injustice are intertwined with the current pandemic, I would like to further comment on colonialism and the legacy of racism, the aftermath of climate disaster and environmental hazards, and finally, the connection to the current pandemic crisis. On colonialism and the legacy of racism, it is important to acknowledge that the harmful impact of climate disaster and the burden of environmental hazards is the product of earlier colonialism. From the moment that colonizers set foot in the Americas, they sought to extract natural resources and drastically alter the ecosystem and ways of life of indigenous people. And they saw these new territories as unlimited resources, right? They could exploit by pushing indigenous people out of their lands and into forced labor. A labor supply that was later violently increased with African slaves. You know, and then we have the Jim Crow laws in the South, which control where Blacks could live, where they could work, play, and worship. Later with the Great Migration to the North and the federal government's redlining policy, which denied federally backed mortgages and credit to Black families, they confronted very limited access to better homes and neighborhoods. And this kind of like, you know, set the landscape for the way of life for Black families. Neighborhood segregation, you know, locked them out of healthy environments, better schools and green spaces, reliable public transportation and healthcare, decent jobs and more food options, to name just a few of the resources that are essential to human well-being. Now, for immigrant community, especially those from Latin America and the Caribbean, the burden of environmental toxics is something they know from their homelands, right? While we cannot attribute the movement of people around the world to be solely the result of climate disasters and environmental pollution, it is a major push and one that is predicted to intensify with more disaster and the disproportionate share of environmental toxics located in countries with a lesser carbon footprint and consumption-based way of life, right? And this is a huge form of inequality that we're also seeing not only in this country, but throughout the world. In the United States, immigrant communities have settled in neighborhoods that share the same characteristics as those of Black neighborhoods. So climate disasters and environmental burdens highly falls on the disadvantaged communities of Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, and low-income earners, and in particular, the women, the very old and young, LGBTQ, the disabled, and undocumented. In short, this burden has been created and elevated by decades of racist environmental policies. They have segregated these communities into areas lacking social and economic investments to effectively prepare for and respond to the health impacts of pollution and climate change. Now, speaking on the aftermath of climate events and accumulation of environmental hazards, they have deadly impact in these communities. We can name, for example, extreme weather events like droughts, wildfires, heavy downpours, winter storms, floods, and hurricanes and heat waves. This can cause infrastructure disruptions, disease, the loss of human life, and other species. Drinking water can be contaminated by heavy rains, and flooding. Droughts can bring serious scarcity of clean drinking water and food, and as we all know, greater risk for wildfires and heat. Extreme weather events disrupt electrical power, transportation, emergency services, access to clean water and food, and much more. As recent as last week, we saw this happening in Texas. But this is an old and recurring story, right? From hurricanes like Katrina in the South, Maria in Puerto Rico, and Eta and Iota in Central America this past November. The story continues. Migration and relocation is the only choice that many people are faced with in the aftermath of extreme climate disasters. They search for a new place to live with a better supply of food and clean water, better jobs, and without the social conflicts that a scarcity of fundamental survival resources bring about. And we are all familiar with the caravans, right? And a lot of the time the caravans are framed as the product of a lot of violence in those countries and also economic disruption, but there is also a lot of the issue of, people having to move because of extreme climate disasters in the past decade or so. And while climate disasters are not a direct cause of air pollution, the burning of fossil fuel is, right? Climate disasters can worsen air pollution problems. For example, heat waves mixed with drought conditions can trigger intense wildfires that cause high levels of air pollution and infrastructure damage to pipelines, storage tanks, and processing equipment can release a lot of lethal materials. Some of the most risky environmental problems in Chicago are concentrated on the west and south side of the city with the greatest exposure to toxic air, water, and land pollutants. It is here where heavy concentration of industry, as it was mentioned before, and landfills continue to have an exorbitant negative impact on the health of residents who are majority Blacks and Latinx. I invite you to check out the Climates of Inequality project on the Latino Cultural Center website. This is a traveling exhibition featuring the local story of La Villita, Little Village, along with a series of presentations by local environmental justice leaders. You can find the 7 presentation videos on the same website and web page, which I will share with all of you on the chat a little bit later. So the connection between the consequences of climate disaster and environmental hazards to the current pandemic crisis is not coincidental, right? If we can show the map, the slide for the first map.
Sure.
Set of map. Okay, so we're witnessing how the highest rate of COVID-19 deaths are found in neighborhoods with the most air pollution from line workers, economic hardship, and with fewest resources to respond. And you can see there the race disparity and segregation on the left and the coronavirus deaths on the other map. And these maps, they are pointing to North Lawndale and Gresham, which are predominantly Black neighborhood, and also Latinx neighborhoods somewhere in the middle there in South Lawndale. So, people who live in these neighborhoods are more prone to suffer from medical conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, asthma, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, making them particularly vulnerable to the impacts of air pollution. There is growing evidence of increased rates of COVID-19 and COVID death rates in areas with high level of air pollution, since toxic air can make people chronically ill. I don't think this is something that is undisputable anymore. And again, I will be sharing some of those studies, the links to those studies in the chat later in case someone wants to check those out. We can see, if let's go to the next set of maps here. So you know, how we can see here the correlation between the history of housing discrimination that I was talking about before with air pollution and asthma, extreme heat and flooding, and these areas with these different colors of oranges and beige and blues exemplify where those concentration of all these different things are happening, overlapping one another. You know, we can see, we can clearly see how many decades of structural inequalities right now, amplified by the coronavirus pandemic, continue to dictate who gets dumped and who gets resources to mitigate the risks and harms of climate disaster and environmental pollution. It is not a you know, a good story. But let's go to the next slide. I would like to, you know, I would like to end by acknowledging that environmental justice champions have been at work for decades, dealing with the hardships of environmental pollution and seeking government action to correct and prevent further harm in their communities. You know, and they continue to demand justice and putting forward a vision to create healthier and safer community. And I think you will hear more on this as the next presenters will talk about specific neighborhoods and the community-based solutions that are happening there.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Rosa, thank you so much. I especially appreciate ending this topic on a, you know, an uplifting note.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of progress to be made, and I think this year especially has been like so effective for that specifically. Thank you. Okay. Next, we're going to be moving on to our speakers from the Freshwater Lab.
Hello, everybody. Me and Citlalli are doing a two-parter. So I'm doing the first part, which I'm going to give a brief introduction of the Backward River. The Backward River is a multimedia collaboration between artists, writers, urban planners, researchers, activists, and many more people who range all over different fields. And the Backward River consists of two parts with branching elements, no pun intended. And those parts are the River Speaks and the Chicago River is a Pipeline. The River Speaks is a project I wrote in collaboration with other members of the Backward River, in which we personify different parts of the river. And the Chicago River is a Pipeline is, I have a very good summary here, dwells into the history and damage caused by its Frankenstein reconstruction, as well as Chicago's pollution doesn't just affect Chicagoans as well. And if you would like to learn more about either one of these, please visit our website. I'll put it in the chat, thebackwardriver.org. No spaces, just one big word, as you can see in our slide. By visiting our website, you'll learn about the Chicago River, what our team is doing to raise awareness, and our current events we have planned throughout the year. We also have podcasts, interviews, and various ways to mobilize yourself and your community to take back the water for the people. Next slide, please. So the River Speaks, like I said, is a multi-part narrative that weaves in the perspectives of the 6 parts of the river. Those parts are the Upper North Branch, North Shore Channel, North Branch, Main Stem, South Branch, and Sanitary and Ship Canal. Each part has a different persona, different from each other, just like how they are different in real life when you see them. They each echo the issues and mentality of the people or corporations around them. When I wrote these personas, I created a thematic duality in which the branches are depicted as a family unit, albeit dysfunctional, while the other parts are depicted as colonizers and gentrifiers, which is prevalent in the Sanitary and Ship Canal. From there, so moving on, next slide, please. Moving on, we're looking in particular at the North Branch and the South Branch. The North Branch is meant to represent someone who's lived in a neighborhood for a very long time, someone who's been there for decades, who's lived past the gentrification done through, massive major developments coming in to push people of color out to build condos, or on the South Side, instead of getting condos, you get logistics centers for Target, Amazon, Walmart, which has numerous diesel trucks rushing in and out, polluting the air, as well as other factories that Citlalli will get into more detail with. The North Branch is voiced by Tanika Johnson, and the South Branch is meant to be depicted as the current generation's activism and unapologetic approach to calling out the issues that affect them and their communities. And that's voiced by Samer Owaida. Sorry if I mispronounced their name. And he is an activist and artist, just like Tanika Johnson is. I do have some clips I would like to play. They're located right there. Can you start that one at 1:14? Yes. And it will be, then pause it at 2 minutes in, please.
Can you hear?
I don't think we can hear it. I don't know if...
Okay, let me. I'll try the other one, or
yeah, I don't hear
I'm
them.
not sure.
That's unfortunate.
Is there somewhere externally where I might be able to find them real quick? Possibly.
That's fine.
Okay.
If we can't get this running, if you'll like to listen to the full clips and learn more about the Chicago River, please visit our website, the backwardriver.org. You can even read along. We have transcripts for each of the audio clips, as well as more information as I mentioned before. And from that, I would like to pass it on to my fellow team member, Citlalli.
Awesome. Maybe we'll try to find some links to provide you guys with later when we send out the materials.
Sure. All right. Okay. So as talked in the beginning with Elena and Penny, so the river was engineered at the beginning of the 20th century to send northern industrial waste southward, ultimately connecting the Chicago waterways to the Mississippi River, and then through the sanitary ship canal. And then this picture right here at the top right is how the Chicago River was reversed in the construction. And then if you look below, you can see that the South Branch of the Chicago River connects to the sanitary ship canal, and then ultimately to the Gulf of Mexico. So factories tend to be built alongside water to facilitate the release of industrial byproducts, and basically our waste is just sent away. And the heaviest burden falls on neighborhoods seeking environmental justice, which are largely low-income and disproportionately communities of color. And then such communities confront daily damage to their health, safety, and quality of life. Furthermore, public funds tend to go to private corporations that end up profiting from that damage. So in the next slide, I'll be focusing on the major polluters and pollutants of the Chicago River. And these polluters and pollutants are concentrated around the South Branch of the Chicago River. And then again, because it connects to the sanitary ship canal, with no regard to the communities that live nearby. So if you go to the next slide, I'll be starting with, oh, I'm so sorry, you know what, stay on that slide. So I'll be talking about the Crawford and the Fish generating stations. which are coal-fired power plants that are in the midst of toxic demolition. Actually, Crawford was already demolished by Hilco, which is a corporate, like an industrial corporation, basically. And then also be focusing on Amazon and the logistics centers that are concentrated on the south side. And they actually, they contribute to a lot of diesel pollution. And also I'll be touching on General Iron, which is the metal recycling facility that is now being relocated to the southeast side of the city. And then I won't be touching on Petco, but Petco is also a major polluter, mostly on by the Calumet River. And then, yeah, so we'll just be going on to the next slide and talking about Hilco. So the former Crawford plant was demolished earlier this year without warning on Easter weekend in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. And that same day that the that the Crawford plant was demolished showed that Latinx people had the second highest death rate in Chicago. So Hilco Redevelopment Partners is a corporation that targets obsolete industrial sites to turn them into more desirable locations for other corporations. And the current project includes the Crawford Generating Station, and it's being transformed into a Target warehouse, despite community led efforts to. They basically, Low Village Environmental Justice Organization is broadcasting that they do not want Hilco in their neighborhood. And then due to Hilco's kindness and the city's leniency on their constant violation, numerous events have caused toxic particulates to be dusted over Little Village, which is, again, predominantly Hispanic community. So the plants were shut down due to its high and toxic pollution output. And they were the biggest industrial cause of lung and heart damage. And according to National Research Council, they cost more than 120 million a year in hidden health damages. And Crawford and Fisk are two. I'm not talking about Fisk because this is mostly focusing on Crawford, but together they have emitted 230 pounds of mercury, 17,000 tons of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide, and then 260,000 pounds of soot. So if you go to the next slide, Penny, there's a video on the fallout that happened. If you could just watch that. Yeah, just to say again, this happened during COVID, the pandemic, and on Easter weekend with no warning.
It's very jarring.
Yeah. So basically Hilco is leasing the site to build a Target warehouse in direct response to the Amazon of Amazon's models of big warehouse retail. And basically they're just replacing one polluter for another. And then in the next slide, okay, so the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization is broadcasting that polluting industries do not have a place in the neighborhood. They're protesting Hilco's plan to build the 1 million square foot Target distribution center at the former site of the Crawford coal plant. And their billboard campaign shows a little girl wearing a face mask that reads, "Exchanging coal for diesel doesn't save her lungs." And then there's also a link down here that directs people to sign the petition to stop construction. And then I just want to reiterate that Alvejo is committed to bring a just transition of the former Crawford site. And they want to shift from dirty industry. And they no longer want to be a human filter for air pollution. And the Hilco redevelopment plan goes against their goals and desires. And then in the next slide, I'll be touching on the Amazon development plan. So in November 2020, the City Commission approved a 30 million Amazon logistics facility in the Pilsen Industrial Corridor that also borders Bridgeport. And the warehouse will combine two sites on South Halsted and South Corbett along the south branch of the Chicago River. Prologues, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that, but they're the country's largest developer of industrial real estate, and they'll be leasing the building to Amazon. And then Penny, can you just go to the next slide real quick? So the former, so across the site of development will be what used to be the fish generating station. If you guys could see that across the, on top of the picture, across the South Branch. So that was what used to be the fish generating station on Cermak Road. And then that former coal power plant station was shut down in 2012, again, due to community-led efforts against air pollution and the negative health impacts. So the public health risk and environmental impacts brought by polluting industries continues to be a main concern to these communities. And then if you go back to the Amazon, yeah. So the warehouse will be 112,000 square feet in size with 487 parking spaces. They'll operate 24/7 hours a day, 7 days a week. And according to a traffic study, up to 600 commercial vehicles can move in and out of the facility in a day. This proposed development is part of the 7 last mile facilities. So Amazon warehouses are already developed in Pullman, McKinley Park, Little Village, Gage Park, and Cicero. And then according to Amy Quinn from a Southside Weekly article, the intention is to concentrate these neighborhoods with these warehouses to compete with retailers for same or next day delivery. And then I'm just gonna touch on General Iron real quick. So I bet a lot of you guys heard about General Iron and the ongoing hunger strike. So basically, in May 2020, an explosion forced General Iron to temporarily shut down its north side scrapyard. And now it has been approved to move to the southeast side along the Calumet River. Although General Iron has been ticketed 11 times during the months of January through May 2020, it's still being moved over, and just community concerns are like people are not being listened to. Like they're just not being listened to, that they don't want this. Like it's crazy to me how they think that they can just shut it down in Lincoln Park and then relocate it to the southeast side. And they've also been ticketed 11 times for untreated emissions along the Chicago River. So the current site of General Iron in Lincoln Park will be a site of a 6 million Lincoln Yards mega development. And then the east side neighborhood is 82% Hispanic, Latino, and is already overburdened with toxic industries. But I believe that Thomas will be talking more about the southeast side. So I won't focus too much on that, but I do want to give the overall message that the south branch of the river continues to be used as a dump for industrial waste without concerns of nearby communities. These communities already lack open space, are unaware of current developments, and their voices continue to be excluded. I've conducted a recent survey in Pilsen that showed that residents noticed the disparities in investment between the north and the south branch of the river. And they described many the open spaces near industrial sites as abandoned, gross, polluted with heavy metals, and full of garbage. And then I'll be passing on the presentation to Thomas.
Thank you so much, Tristen and best of them.
We got reverb. Let me see, can I share my disabled? Oh,
That. Thank you so much, guys. That was a really awesome depth of information about the industries as they stand and learning more about the river and the many perspectives that can be provided in kind of building this overall narrative. So thank you very much. We're gonna move on to Thomas's presentation.
yeah, if you can you all hear me quite well?
Anyone have any issues or anything that any type of logistical issue this time before we continue?
All right. So you can hear me now, right? Quite well? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right. So I tend to focus on toxic, I frame things as toxic tours. I've been giving toxic tours for the last 15 something years. I'll talk very, very quickly. So I'm going to ask you to switch really fast because I like to be very visual. I work on the south shores of Lake Michigan. And one of the things that we think about, two things I wanted to bring up right now. I want to acknowledge Peggy Salazar, who's the director of the Southeast Environmental Task Force, Olga Batista with the Ban Petcoat Coalition, and Jade Messon, who is actually one of the hunger strikers right now on the Southeast side. They are doing phenomenal work on the Southeast side. The fact that most of you up north know about them and know what's going on right now and the way in which they are organizing is phenomenal. Also want to recognize that we call the Southeast side and the Calumet River the Calumet Industrial Corridor. Anytime they use that language, what we're really talking about is an industrial colony. And I really think it's really important that we use that language of settler colonizers in how we have this relationship to our land. Anyhow, this is a poem that was written in 1908 in my town, East Chicago, not to be confused with the Southeast side, and I'll be talking a little bit about that. This was opening up what we called Indiana Harbor, or the Indiana Days. And it goes, the skies are often dreary and the air is filled with smoke in Northwest Indiana from the gas and the coal and the coke, but we wouldn't be without it, for it's just the way we grow in Northwest Indiana where the furnace fires glow. You can switch. So we tend to see ourselves as the workshop of America. And when we see smoke, everybody here, even today, see jobs. They see kids being fed. They see kids going off to college and getting educated. People like me are communicating, and lots in yourselves are communicating that it's really also, there's another metaphor, it's pollution as well. And so it's a really, we're beating up some of the barriers of the working class in terms of what they're proud of or what they've done. All right, switch. All right, one of the things I really want to talk about in terms of this toxic culture is this hyper neoliberalism. And one of the main things that we work on is this, what's often how things are outlaid or how things are described is what we call plausible deniability. And when it comes to like the EPA, we're almost 50 years into the EPA. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the EPA. Forgive me about that, but I'll be explaining that down the road. But we don't test what we don't want to find. They have been the mediator. Don't tell me, I don't mean to disparage them entirely. There are lots of good people, but there is this mindset of how you communicate information. They don't take a responsibility for themselves in the neoliberal era. And that's gone on for at least 30, 40 years. All right, next. I'll talk more about that as well. One way to understand the quandary that we're in is how we allocate resources in our system, or how, let's talk at our market economy or capitalism. The ABA identifies that there are 30,000 environmental attorneys in the US that are working full-time. 28,000 of them are working full-time for industries and businesses. Less than 2,000 of them are working on behalf of government agencies. Less than 600 are working full-time for nonprofits. And of course, in the US, we don't have, our nature doesn't employ an environmental lawyer. I think this needs to be flipped. The allocation of resources is invert in what we really need. When I need to get an environmental attorney, I have to go 2, 3 counties or 5 counties away or up to Chicago to get an environmental attorney that can work pro bono for me, not full-time. All right, go on. A switch. All right, so give you an understanding where I lie at the southern shores of Lake Michigan. I live right next to Chicago. We are an industrial colony of Chicago. And I want to repeat that again and again. Most of the infrastructure here is owned and operated by Chicago. There are 7.1 million people in the Chicago metropolitan area. That's greater than the population of the entire state of Indiana. So what's happened is Chicago operates. Gary Airport here is owned and operated by Chicago. I can go on and on about the resources. All right, switch. All right, give you a little bit of history of East Chicago. East Chicago was founded in 1893 by Inland Steel. It was a steel colony right from the beginning. From the 30s to the 70s, 1970s, there were about 57,000 people, 60 languages or nationalities spoken here. Today, there are about 27,000 people. We've seen a lot of depression in the region. About almost nearly 60% are Latinx, 34% are African-American, Black, and 6% are white. Switch. All right, the median residents in East Chicago, about 32% of East Chicagoans live below the poverty level. About 15% of it live below half the poverty level. So we have a great level of poverty here. The median, or the average in Indiana is about 11.9 or almost 12%. The median home value in the United States is $340,000. In East Chicago, it's about 74. And then we have neighborhoods where it's about $5,000 to $10,000. All right, switch. We also have, for the last 100 years, have had the highest infant mortality rate in the state of Indiana continuously for the last 100 years, and often in the country. We are also we have the largest steel mill in the Western Hemisphere with Inland Steel, and the largest tar sands refinery in the entire nation. That's BP. All right, switch. We're also happen to be on the southern shores of Lake Michigan. We are for the most 20th century, we were the 3rd most biodiverse region on the continent. We are losing biodiversity very, very quickly. In the last 10 years, we went from the 3rd most biodiverse to the 7th to the 10th, and we're losing it very quickly. All right, switch. We're also in Indiana, we discharge more pollution into our waterways than any other state in the union. This is a study by Illinois University down in Champaign, wasting our waterways. East Chicago discharges 27 million pounds. This is actually from 2016, where Illinois discharges 8 million pounds of known toxins into its waterways. All right, switch. So that's the water we drink, the air we breathe. Lake County, Indiana, where I reside, ranks generally in the top 10 for industrial pollutions releases into the airs. That's out of 3,143 counties in America. We generally rank in the top 10. Not only that, but the northeasterlies blow it over Lake Michigan, and it blows over Chicago. And our industries, that's BP, ArcelorMittal, and US Steel, tend to be the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th most largest polluters, industrial polluters of Chicago's airshed. All right, switch. We talked about the coal slag, or the slag that infills. So here's a map. Everything in light blue here is infilled by steel slag. Everything in light brown, that is fly ash. There are neighborhoods that are built on this. Remember, this is, again, the dune lands. These are dunes and swale that have been infilled by industrial waste, and neighborhoods built on top of it. Switch. So that's the land we use. Here's a map, and we're going to go quickly out of this. This is a map I did for a comprehensive plan for East Chicago. This is an environmental inventory. I won't go into it, but it's a horrid story. Keep going. This is the Indiana Harbor Shipping Canal, the most polluted body of water for the last 100 years. I used to be the director of this, and the EPA is almost 50 years since its infancy. This waterway has never been cleaned up. It is still the most polluted body of water. It's still the greatest source of PCBs into the Great Lakes. All right, switch. All right, this is what the Indiana Harbor Shipping Canal looked like in 1968. Switch. This is 1969. Switch. This is 1970. Switch. And this is today. It is still a quandary of oil and slur. Now the Caliuga River burnt, but that had gotten cleaned up because that was gentrified. This is in an industrial corridor, so nothing has been cleaned up. All right, switch. This is the Calumet neighborhood in East Chicago. This is where we found 1,200 people living on a lead refinery for the last 40 years. EPA had been testing it, and you see the little blue squares on the map. For 30 years, they've been testing in those 3 squares and finding not high levels. We forced the EPA to do testing, and comprehensive testing, and discovered that the 97% of the land was not only high in lead, it was 228 times, oops, forgive me, 228 times the legal limit. Oh, I gotta get rid of this. All right, switch. So a couple of years ago, 1,200 people that lived on that land discovered that they were living on toxic land for 30 years. And they were told that they had to move out within 30 days. All right, switch. They were thrown to the winds everywhere. So we've been organizing a culture of resistance for the last 15 years. And I think this phrase by Gloria Richardson really kind of is comprehensive of what we're trying to deal with. First-class citizen does not beg for freedom. A first-class citizen does not plead for the white power structure to give him something that the whites have no power to give or to take away. Human rights are human rights, not white rights. It's the same thing with the environment. The air we breathe, the water we drink, and the land we use are not corporate rights. They're our rights. All right, switch. I'm just going to shoot through a bunch of slides. So we've been organizing against the pipelines up in Standing Rock. Continue, switch. Organizing in Michigan. This is the MyCats. Women went to prison. 3 women went to prison because they locked down on pipelines. All right, switch. We've been giving toxic tours. This is a toxic tour I gave about 3-4 years ago to the head of the EPA to let them see what was going on in East Chicago. Millions and millions of undisclosed pollution sources. All right, switch. We've been organizing art shows. This is a show that we had called Pipelines and Borderlines, People Can't Drink Oil. Switch. So what we did is we got people that lived along the pipelines to produce prints. This is Marktown. It's a National Historic District. It's a poor working class neighborhood. In 2014, BP constructed the largest tar sands refinery right across the street from it and is now in the process of tearing down the neighborhood. Switch. In a campaign to kind of fight that, we did a lot of resources. This is one of the things that we did. We took photographs of all the residents in the neighborhood and blew them up and posted them on all the fences and all the houses in the neighborhood. Switch. We also brought Reverend Billy and the Stop Shop Gospel Choir to perform an exorcism of BP. Switch. And then in 2016, we held the Break Free Midwest, where we got 1,400 people from the Midwest to converge on BP. We locked down at the gates and shut it down for a day. 41 of us got arrested that day. All right, switch. While doing that, we were able to bring a lot of attention to us. This is on the southeast side after the Ban-Petco coalition, where we shut down the coal brothers. We then went after Agrifine to deal with the pollution that they were releasing. All right, switch. And then in East Chicago with the lead contamination, we were able to force Scott Pruitt to come down to East Chicago. And it was his very first public appearance after being nominated. And we were able to begin to negotiate with Scott Pruitt, working with policy. Switch. And just to give you kind of the intersectionality, we're also fighting at the Gary Airport, which borders East Chicago. That's where 25,000 people have been deported. Immigrants in the Chicagoland are bused all through the Chicagoland, all the way from Milwaukee, are bused to the Gary Airport every Friday. So we have been there every Friday confronting them. Sometimes we have hundreds and hundreds of people. Sometimes in weather like this, we have just 5 or 6. All right, switch. We've also been organizing with the Poor People's Campaign, locking down at the state houses here in Indianapolis. All right, switch. And I think this is the last. We've also organized with Black Lives Matter. This is our first march in Northwest Indiana. It was in Hammond, where the Hammond police pepper sprayed us and stuff. So we have been working intersectionally, and that's switch. And that's it. This is I'm going to end with a photo outside my window, and that's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Thomas. Those images are really, really jarring and very illuminating. So much to our speakers.
Thank you so much. Incredible.
We learned so much from these talks, and we are excited to hear what everybody's thoughts are on the information that we've all just received. So now that our presentations are complete, we are going to open it up to any questions that people have. If you would like to type in the chat or verbally express some questions, either for our guest speakers or just on anything content-wise, fire away. Thank you for joining us, Rachel. Yeah, you are welcome to stay for as long as you would like. We have the Zoom is scheduled for up to 8:30, so we just wanted to take this time to discuss for as much as people are interested in. So this from here on out, it's open time.
Hi. I had a question. I really loved hearing all of the speakers. They gave so much background from the beginning to Chicago all the way to like the industries that are polluting Chicago today. And like it's super informal for me because I'm not an environmental policy major, anything that's in the field of environmentalism. So I appreciated the knowledge. I had maybe a basic question for anyone who'd like to answer, but as we were going through the decimation of like neighborhoods, I was thinking a lot about permits and who allows like permits of building industrial waste sites in these neighborhoods. Is it the mayor? Is it aldermen? I was wondering how those are created and what's the sort of legal process, because I know General Iron has a hunger strike happening right now and it's been a couple of days, and so I was wondering where they were battling in maybe the legal procession. Someone had any information on that?
That's not something that I am aware of.
So I can speak a little bit about that. So right now it's literally in the mayor's hands. The mayor can nix this. And one of the things to recognize too, and we've been facing this, you have a 25-year moratorium on landfills in Chicago. That has been a huge hit to Gary, because what happens is, forgive my language, but shit rolls downhill. And that's what we try to do, is work across borders to have solidarity. And that's one thing that's really good about the Southeast Environmental Task Force and the Ban Petco Coalition, is that if it's not good enough for their community, it's not good enough for another community downriver. And so one of the things that's happening right now is, if and when these projects get get nixed in Chicago, they end up usually in Gary. It's one landfill after another, and they keep greenwashing them as well. So it's a tough fight, but we have a lot of good people fighting it, and it is with the mayor.
I also wanted to just touch on something real quick, that there are like legal limits that these industries like can reach. Just as long as they stay under that limit, it's not an issue, but they're still polluters, you know, they still affect people. People still have breathing problems. They don't have that open space. They don't have good air quality. Even in the communities that border the South Branch connects to the sanitary ship canal. And the canal has a different quality than the rest of the Chicago River. So, you know, that research is still really hard to read into, and then there's still also lack of information. But yeah, like Thomas said, it's all in the mayor's hands right now, like the General Iron. That's why there's like hashtags like deny the permit, call Mayor Lightfoot, you know, make your voice heard.
Let's also acknowledge that for the last 50 years, what Pilsen has suffered, what the Southeast has suffered, was all legal. These were all permitted sites. And so I kind of say I live under the plume of permitting. I'm being poisoned because it's allowed to poison me. And we have to get, if we're going to get to net zero, we need to have zero emissions for these kinds of communities.
Just a follow-up question. Thank you both for talking. Is there any like accountability for when these permits destroy neighborhoods, or is it all due to like the research that locals do in order to like make coalitions and, you know, get their voices out? There's no accountability system for when people, you know, permit these harmful structures?
Yeah, they do have accountability, that there's fines, but these polluting industries make tons of money, that these fines are just, it's like a slap on the wrist for them. They can continue polluting, they can pay out the fine like nothing, it doesn't affect them. That's one thing I know.
And they do constant violations, and it doesn't end. Like they'll get multiple fines. It's not like, oh, all right, you reached your limit on fines, you need to stop right now. No, it's like you can keep going, and it's nothing. It's a drop in a bucket for them. They can continue to poison us and continue to deteriorate the land we live on because it's legal. And just like I think Thomas put it very, not very frank, he put it very well. It was like, because they're just going to keep doing it, and there is the accountability is, you can't make it with money. You can't, fines are not going to hold them accountable. We try that already. We see what happens, and it's not working.
Yeah, fines are worked into their business model, but even worse than that, they are so low that you're charged more for overdraft on your bank than they are charged for killing a worker in their plant. For instance, I think in ArcelorMittal just this last year, somebody had been killed. You know, it's $4,000 fine. That's it.
Yeah, and one of the things that is very frustrating too is that you're seeing how throughout the Illinois now we have all these Amazon warehouses opening up, right? And it's going to be the same situation as the Hilco, where, you know, there will be more diesel trucks and all of that. And it's frustrating because they are also getting a lot of tax breaks. Not only are they coming in and polluting, you know, these areas, they are really getting, you know, huge tax breaks. I mean, some of these I've read recently that for Amazon, I mean, they are getting, the tax breaks are so high that it almost covers the construction of their warehouse, you know, and hiring people for an X amount of years. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of politicians involved in these decision makings, and yeah, and not really looking after the well-being of the communities. Yeah.
And they use that excuse that they're going to be providing jobs, but the thing is that these jobs they're not good jobs. Like Amazon, I heard that they barely get breaks. It's going to be in a warehouse with no windows. So it's they say that it's for jobs, but they're not good jobs.
Not at all. I
And
mean,
now
like Amazon.
essential.
Yeah, the hard part about Amazon is that it's how do you tell people to stop using Amazon? Like they have committed atrocity after atrocity, and we still use them. They have ingrained themselves in our society to the point where we can't turn them away. Where the city is paying for these factories to pop up on neighborhoods of Black and brown people, and that's fine because like it's good for the economy. We want this convenience, right? And that's why you have Target also. You have Walmart coming in because they want to compete with Amazon. So you're just going to have a bunch of warehouses that litter the South Side and litter other cities that have more higher populations of people of color, because redlining, all these effects that like their land isn't worth that much, they aren't worth that much, so we can just build here and continue to poison them because we are allowed to do that because we've created the narrative that these people don't matter, and that's what we're trying to change. We want that narrative to change and be fixed because people can't live like this. People can't work like this. It's horrendous.
This is an example. This Amazon thing is an example why we need to keep talking, because that US-led Superfund site I just described to you, we worked 4 years with the EPA to get $100 million to clean it up and bring it back to residential use. Then we went into COVID, and the lobbyists for the industry started up a community group themselves, acted like they were a community group, and had exclusive meetings with the EPA. And then they had an executive order to switch 4 years of work with the community. Now it's going to be, they're planning on making it an Amazon warehouse on top of that land. So we seem to have a lot of things. When we talk, we discover, when I talk about my numbers and situations, I find that there are 100 other communities like ours that are being the same modus operandus, same MO that is being done to my community is being done to your community, being to the Southeast side, whether it's Pilsen or maybe it's in New Jersey or whatever. So we got to keep talking.
Yeah, and if you guys want to check out more on this, definitely visit the Backward River. I'm also doing more research on the South Branch and the industrialization and lack of open space. Some people don't even know that they have like parks around Pilsen. Even then, the parks are not invested in. They don't have that same access to the river as they do in the north. There's no river walk, there's no bike path. It's just crazy.
I'm realizing that I have to share the end of the presentation that had information about just our organization and also how to get involved with these other groups that have been so kind as to collaborate with us. So Citlalli and Tristen, if you guys want to let anybody know in your chat or verbally about anything that people can get involved with or learn about, feel free to share that, or I can go back into the slides if anyone's interested. I'm going to copy
We're sending them anyway too, right?
Yeah, and yes, the slides are going to get sent out. I'm about to copy the information from that is basically in case you're new to Students for Animal Liberation, if you're interested in getting involved. One thing that really resonated with me from Thomas's presentation, some of the images for some of those Superfund sites, that information of that canal that has never been cleaned up was so crazy to me, and especially from kind of more of an environmental standpoint, when you take into consideration the fact that this is an extremely niche and critical ecosystem, a apart from all of the, like social and humanitarian considerations, this is a ecosystem that is incredibly vulnerable and is just been made to be a dump. And it's unbelievable because we have such little of our lakeshore still available for biodiversity, for anything. And that really, that was really hard to see, but obviously important for everybody.
Yeah, you might want to think of it as a gated industrial community that is committed ecocide, and they are going to protect their liabilities to the end.
Wow, powerful.
Yeah. Thank you, though, Thomas, for sharing that information with us. Is that something that I can maybe screen share that you would try to drop in there, Rosa?
Yeah, it's not dropping.
Maybe she can link it to like the Google song.
Is it in slides that something we're...
That's a lot of great work you do, Thomas. Like the slides.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, so if there's anything that anywhere I go I can access what you were trying to share, let me know, and I put that up on the screen. Does anybody know about any specific instances of, I mean, obviously there's a lot going on in Texas right now, and that is still kind of unfolding. But I'm interested to know if anyone has, done any research or saw anything specific about, the ways that marginalized communities are being affected with, in comparison to more privileged communities in, wake of this, these events.
Yeah, I think the blackouts are deliberate. I mean, like, they are disproportionately affecting people of color in Texas. And the problem with Texas is that they believe in like the free market, and the free market has ruined their energy, like all over the state. They believe in, they had their own power grid separate from the federal one. So they decided to just, because they didn't want federal regulation. So like free market, everyone can do what they want, and they chose not to weatherize their system. So every time there's a storm, like the one that happened last week, we have them shutting down. And unfortunately, it disproportionately affects people of color. So you have communities that who are freezing to death. Like literally, it's sad, it's horrendous, and the government of Texas doesn't know what to do because they are incompetent and they let this happen. And it's sad, but it's all over the state because they have chosen they chose profits over people like they always do.
Yeah, no, and it's like there have been instances in Texas specifically where they've had situations like this in past winters where their infrastructure hasn't had the capacity to deal with such a situation, but it hasn't been the first time that it's happened, especially now in the climate that we're in with, extreme weather and like major fluctuations in
they had 10 years
weather.
to prepare. Like this happened 10 years ago, and they had 10 years to prepare. And 10 years later, they did nothing, and people are dying because of their incompetence.
Yes, yeah. It's a lot. But I mean, and now they're trying to put it on, I heard
Renewable
something
energy.
about placing the blame.
It doesn't make sense. It's Republican talking points to discredit what is a real problem. They like this will happen if green energy comes into power, which no, this is what happens when capitalism is in charge of utilities that should be essential for everyone. It shouldn't be owned by a corporation for profit. These should be owned by us, the people. And when you have corporations that choose who take over our utilities, we have, Texas in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're blaming the Green New Deal, and the Green New Deal has not even started yet.
Yes, it's not. It's hilarious. It's Republicans are absurd. They are ridiculous people
Yeah.
who come up with lies after lies, and it's unfortunate that people believe it.
You know, and it's also, to me, it's really crazy that it's one of 9 states that don't pay any taxes, state taxes. And they're the ones who complain all the time, along with Florida, how, you know, they don't feel like they should be subsidizing, you know, California with the fires and New York with the COVID, and here they are, right? These are, you know, a lot of the Republican states that don't pay personal income tax. Absolutely 0.
Speaking of infrastructure, it's like the deep tunnel in Chicago. I don't know if you guys have heard of the deep tunnel, but it's basically a solution to flooding and keeping the Chicago River, like I guess, under levels when it storms. It basically captures all the stormwater because we have a combined sewer system. And we have spent $4 billion to basically build the deep tunnel, which is still under construction, and it's 45 years behind construction. It was supposed to be completed in like the 1980s, but it did basically like low-income communities are always they actually have like a lot of flooding like backups and floods, but we still spend all this money on the deep tunnel because of the Army Corps. So that's another example of just failing infrastructure and just a waste of like taxpayer money. But if you guys want to check more on that, again, it's on the Backward River.
There, please visit. I think you'll learn a lot. And
you'll learn a lot, yeah, about Chicago water infrastructure and the river, and just how, yeah, the city is very segregated, but so is the Chicago River.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an awesome site. I'm very excited to check it out some more, explore that. There's a lot of really awesome resources that we will provide. You guys send out all of this information. Just some sites that we research this presentation, and also projects that our collaborators are involved with. Does anybody know if there are any where and when any type of in-person demonstrations are going to be held for General Iron protests, possibly?
Tomorrow at 5 o'clock at City Hall, there's going to be a candle vigil.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
In regards to that, is there a main UIC, or excuse me, is there a main Instagram handle that we can look up for the General Iron like updates?
Instagram?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can try to find some links.
There's this one reporter, I forgot, he's on, I think, Block City, Chicago. He's like on the beat of the General Iron. I will find him because I use a lot of his articles to create the slides on Hilco, and I'll just post that.
I think there's like a Southeast Side coalition page. Yeah, if you find like one Instagram page, they'll link you to like a bunch of other ones.
Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, you should check out our Gen Z panel that we just had. Also about like the new wave of activists on environmental activists.
Yeah.
Yeah. they're trying to pivot out of like Facebook like owned products like Instagram and Facebook, but it's hard because they own the market on social media for so much. They have WhatsApp, they have a lot, so it's hard to avoid using them. Yeah, Instagram's there.
I'm gonna drop a handle in here.
Are you dropping our freshwater handles as well, or should I do that?
Can you do that one?
Yeah, I can do that.
So I wanted to say I'm really happy to be on this panel with freshwater lab people. You guys, I don't know if Rachel is still on, but you guys, she is a badass academic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She's like I consider her like my
She
mentor.
is
Like
good.
yeah, she's great. I love her. Anything, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm here. Like she got me into this. Like I wouldn't know, shit about water if it wasn't for her, to be honest.
You guys
and
are
now here I
great.
am. Thank you.
Y'all do great stuff. So I'll share a little quick. I haven't shared it out yet, but my great grandfather was mayor of Chicago during the Chicago fire. And he is the guy that reversed the Chicago River.
Wow.
He's a civil engineer. He brought the Illinois Central to Chicago, and then of course the Rockefellers. He designed it. Then the Rockefellers and all them made him mayor of Chicago, and then he burned the city down.
That's awesome.
It happened.
And made the mistake of reversing the Chicago River. Huge, lots of mistakes gone down. We can look at our own histories and see,
If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have our website, The Backward River.
Tell you.
I've mentioned this to Thomas privately, but I think that kind of rewriting that legacy is an extremely powerful thing to do, and it's very, very admirable.
So I tell you, one thing that's kind of funny is you'll look at he was designing out like he worked on Erie Canal, and he was from the East Coast, and he worked on railroads there, and Canada asked him to do a canal to bypass the Lake Ontario and to go around right to Chicago, and so he designed one out for Canada. And the way in which he designed it, he talked about half the document is about the design documents of how to do it. The other half of the document is all the resources in the West to exploit. That's all it was about, is exploiting. And that was in the 1850s when we didn't, the US did not own that property. It was indigenous property. They were already doing their surveys and ready to exploit it. And he was building out that infrastructure. It was a horrid time. They were doing some shitty stuff. Sorry. But yeah. We have to backtrack. We have to bring back indigenous cultures.
Restoration.
Yes.
Restoration, like what is it? Agriculture? Restorative agriculture, something like that. We need to humans weren't like we weren't like this. Like this is just a system we've created we have created an industry of like where we function off death. Like literally our power is like dead animals, like fossil fuels, like we run on death, which is unfortunate. And I think that we need to move to life, because we see the effects of what death can do. And 500,000 Americans have died from this pandemic. So we need to definitely change the way we're thinking about things.
Yeah.
And it's possible.
Money is fake. And Thomas, it seems like you've got a lot of land back to do in your activism.
Oh, there's some bad stuff. So let me share. I don't know how many were alive in 2000 when Bill Clinton was the president, and we moved across the millennia to new millennia. And he made this speech back then that children that were born in the year 2000 will live on average, will live to over 100 years old because of advances in civilization and medicine and stuff. And now we're only 20 years in, and we've actually lost life expectancy by 20%. And we expect it to even get worse and worse as time goes by.
Bill Clinton, like that era was like a neoliberalist, like liberal, like heaven. Like everyone wants to go back to that time period because like I love the 90s. They love it because it was neoliberalism at its best. And now look what happens, late capitalism. That's where we are now. And it's that's why you hear a lot of like people like, I wish we would go back then because that's when everything was working. We had Clinton, we had, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and things have gotten so much worse. It's a dystopia since then. It wasn't even great then, so.
Facts.
The world to each other. And yeah, basically like I really want to try and bring like these communities that experience a lot of environmental injustice, like bring them back to that relationship. Like, why should you care about this stuff? Like it affects your quality of life, really.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like especially being born in an urban area, like you have just such different perspectives on your relationship with the land and your resources available to you. And it's like there's so many kids that grow up in the city that, never have visited the lake or, have never been out to any, forest preserves outside of the city limits. And it's a disgrace, really. I mean, everyone deserves to have a relationship with land to some effect, and not to say that you can't have it living in the city, but these neighborhoods in particular that are being affected in these ways, it's just not you can't have a healthy relationship with a land that has been tainted to this degree.
And I think the reality that you just described is a way in which this society like deeply spiritually disconnects us from the environment, and especially considering the ancestors of these communities of indigenous people who dedicated their lives and their practice and their religions to respecting and harnessing the forces of nature, and for that to be disrespected, for it to be stolen, and also for it to be completely disconnected from our day-to-day on very minute and also very big levels. It just creates such a deep illusion of reality that we currently exist within. And I also wanted to say that something that is so frustrating as a person who cares about the environment and this like sustainability of taking care of the human population and our native habitat is the idea that we do already at this point in time have the means and the knowledge and the tools and the capability to be doing things sustainably. We know how to do it. It's just the issue is the powers that be. And like how do we start to break those down and just like start functioning, make our society predicated off of one that thinks about the environment with respect and
not something to exploit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's something that I hope to fight for, especially as a soil scientist and a hydrologist. It's just like, what you guys were saying is the idea that these resources are a human right. And I think what comes with being a sustainable culture is also a deeper emotional or spiritual connection to the environment and like a genuine respect for it. I think that's the only way that we're really going to like implement sustainable lifestyles is if we actually like nourish a genuine respect and consciousness for it.
Yeah. I'm curious to know if you, how do you feel about, with this year, with the pandemic? And do you feel that there is hope that, perhaps people and, have another way of looking at the world and, this capital system? I'm just curious to see what you're thinking.
Real quick, I just want to let everybody know that our session ends in the next minute. So if we do get cut off, thank you everyone so very much for joining us today. We're feel extremely like blessed to be able to have this event and meet with all of you amazing, bright-minded people.
Thank you so much.
We're not being cut off, although it was scheduled to 10:30. So if we want to take the opportunity to address what Rosa put out.
Yeah, I think that was an incredible question, Rosa. I would like to ponder it a little bit, but I think Tristen was wanting to add something to that point.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a way too much apathy within our society. I think there's a like a not a carefree, but like an ambivalence to like what's going on. Like there's like people who I feel like we can't get to the point of like respecting the environment because we can't even respect humanity at this point. Like we have these movies that talk about like if an alien invasion come, humanity would band together, and we have this threat right now. We have a threat that's affecting all of humanity, and we have refused to band together. And it's just like I don't want to be pessimistic, but it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when people continue to exacerbate the conditions, continue to and it's hard because like how do you tell people to stay inside, or how do you tell people to, because the government's not doing anything, corporations are getting rich from this. It's a very depressing time to live in, but I think there is a possibility where people like us can do something. I think it needs to come to the point where we can't function within neoliberalism. We can't protest within it. We can't be activists within that system. We need to rebel against it, because while we function within it, they're going to ignore us. They're going to just discard us because, hey, you're still alive, right? You're still in the system. You're still kicking somehow, so don't worry about it. And I think I think we need to change the attitude from apathy to empathy to provide respectability to humanity as well as the planet we live on. And it's really hard to see that, but I think we can get there.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And based off of what you said, I think you're right. Like this is such a daunting issue because it's akin to the manifestations of this nation and racial injustice in our country system today, where it's like not as overt, but it's still like composing and comprising of so many components of our social and societal and cultural reality, and like to be able to restructure our understanding of the environment and the ways in which we harness it will take like a complete recreation of like the general like consciousness on like what the environment is, what it means to us, how it affects our reality, and that's a very daunting task, but that's why a dialogue is so important. And then to what Rosa was saying, more specifically, I think that's a very powerful question. And personally for me, I reflected on that concept a lot, especially over quarantine, because I was forced to stay home, and the only thing I could really do was go for walks in my neighborhood. And I, for the first time, felt like a kid again because I was so acutely aware to the shift in season. I think this also goes to show like the segregation and the discrepancies in the neighborhoods that we discussed this whole night, because I have the privilege of living in a pretty nice taken care of neighborhood, and I do have a considerable amount of green spaces in my neighborhood, so it was somewhat of a very pleasant experience for me. But in terms of people being able to explore the environment more in light of the world and the circumstances, I was discussing this concept with a program that I'm a part of at UIC. It's a program that has just been launched, and it was kind of galvanized by the recent events in the Black Lives Matter protests that occurred over quarantine and summer. It's called Urge, and it's basically this program. People in the environmental science departments meet to discuss and possibly change policies within environmental science departments across universities in the country to try to eliminate any types of racist discrimination within environmental science departments in all of these universities. And we were talking about the ability of certain groups and certain communities to be able to explore the environment and to have, because being able to explore the environment, to travel, is a privilege, especially as a city kid. That's not something that is accessible to everyone. And it has been proven that a vast majority of people within environmental science departments are white people. So yeah, I think that's there's many like nuances to that question. I think very beautiful that you posed it. Thank you.
Rosa, there was a request from people in the chat for you to restate what your question was.
Oh, okay.
Mads, your question about intersectional environmentalism, as far as within the UIC, like the EAES department, there are almost no social environmental classes whatsoever. Those types of things fall into random departments. Like I know the like the Latino studies department, they have like I think they have like an environmental justice class, and it's related to, you know, representing, like showcasing, I believe, like Latin American countries and communities as well. And I know there's a really awesome class called Environmental Public Policy, and it's less on, you know, like community justice and things like that. It gives, you know, kind of like a history of environmentalism and a lot of different causes to be aware of. Honestly, the programming for environmental like coursework at UIC is lacking. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So.
Also, yeah, join the freshwater lab class. That's how we got involved. That's how you can. It's Rachel's the professor for that class. She creates a really great curriculum where you get to learn about water issues, environmental issues, as well as the social aspects that affect them. Because usually there's a divide between the sciences, the STEM, and the humanities, when there should be. That's what we try to do. Like, I'm an English major. I know nothing about like hard data and stuff, but I care about the environment. So like, just like Upton Sinclair can write a book about the effects of, you know, meatpacking in Chicago, I can do that in the same way, because art does that. You know, art, we tell stories to, you know, get us involved, and that's one way you can do that. Like, even if you're not a scientist or someone who's you know, in that field, you can still participate and still help out. So like, even if I felt doubted by the FATACs, like, hey, I'm not a STEM major, I'm not involved in like the hard facts about it, but I can do my research and I can write stories about that inform people, that get people engaged in these issues. So yeah, take the freshwater lab course, try to look out for it, and it's a great class.
I think that's one of the main methods in which we're going to be able to appeal to a greater group of people and to get a lot of people to actually care about the environment if we do so through creative and artistic and interactive outlets.
And community science is also essential. I just want to say that I'm really, you know, deeply proud of the artistic approach that has been taken by all of these panelists, everyone here. I think it's a really, really fantastic approach to take, because it is accessible to a lot of people, and it's deeply emotional. So I think that it's, you know, an awesome pathway for teaching people how they can be involved.
And then the freshwater lab also intersects with like urban, the urban development program, history. Even I'm a scientist, and I took it as an English course too, so that was just completely different from my schedule. But yeah, I definitely seen a lot of stuff to the freshwater lab, people developing like or writing like policy papers or creating like artistic pieces. Yeah.
In general, I feel like it can be kind of hard to be someone that really cares about the environment and animals and progress for sustainability and also social justice being in a science major, because I'm and you know, I think this is just kind of a reflection of UIC in particular, but I don't think that, like, you know, the space that we study in, at least our department, is really takes these social crossovers into consideration very well, which is why I'm very grateful to have, you know, a community like this. And, you know, I remember Rosa and I had discussed before how just a couple of years ago, there were almost no student-led environmental organizations at UIC. Like, I remember coming in as a freshman 3 years ago and thinking, like, well, where are the clubs? Like, what is going on? Like, where do I go?
Yeah.
Where do I go? And I got involved with this, which was kind of like close to what I like kind of wanted to be more involved with. And obviously it's something that is still I'm really passionate about. And Elena and I have had the opportunity in leading this club to kind of adapt it to be more inclusive of other like related disciplines, which has been awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very affirming to see in just a couple of years the progress that has been made in that respect. And would love to be able to share with everybody here some of the other resources that I'm aware of. Yeah, I think maybe this would be a good point if anyone has any, you know, last minute points that they would like to bring up, and then we'll start to wrap things up for the evening, and we'll be sure to send out information following. Is there anyone that has anything they'd like to say?
Let's see. Yeah, so Citlalli answer. That's a great, yeah, that's a great point of that you made there. You know, one of the things that I'm extremely worried about is that I feel that, you know, this pandemic has been sent to us by the goddesses and the gods of the universe, right? To sort of like wake us up and say, because this is not, we all know that this is not going to be the end, right? Like we're going to be confronting more and more these kinds of pandemics because we continue to invade the land of the natural world, right? And so, of course, the animals are crossing over, and you know, there is no longer. And I'm just wondering. I mean, like, I don't hear enough of that kind of conversation. You know, what are we gonna do about, you know, stopping invading through, you know. Going into taking over the environments, the natural environment of the flora and the fauna. I mean, the fauna. How are we going to deal with that if we don't understand that the pandemic? I mean, every pandemic in the world has come out of the interaction between humans and animals, right? And the rest of the animal kingdom. And so, how? I mean. How are we going to get there? How are we going to, when you continue to see, right, people expanding more and more because they want bigger houses, they want, right? I mean, you are now seeing people fleeing the city who have family and going to live in the suburbs because there are bigger houses there. There is more land there. So I feel like we were on the right track by keeping and attracting more people in the city and building taller buildings, you know, making more of the vertical way of life instead of the horizontal way of life. And right now it seems like we're going backwards to people wanting to live in, you know, big houses and a lot of green spaces, you know, in the suburb. I'm just curious because some of you are scientists and some of you are also in CAPA, right?
Well, I know a couple of people that are in this presentation that are in, you know, social sciences. A couple, maybe 3 people that are scientists. Yeah, so it's about this group. Um, yeah, really interesting topic is zoonotic viruses, the history of pandemic or not. We're, as they say, entering a, you know, pandemic era that is, you know, predicated by climate change and a inappropriate relationship between humans and animals and the land. Real quick, I just kind of relating to animals and, you know, the environment, wanted to let you guys know, although we haven't established a date, this was an event of ours that happened to be rescheduled, but we are going to be having an an event that is a similar type of presentation that discusses the native ecology of the Chicago land area. And so we'll be talking about, you know, various different types of life forms that are here, animals that have adapted to the city, and yeah, it's going to be awesome. It'll be a very cool event. Well, I think that is where we're going to leave it off for tonight. Thank you again, everybody, for all of your contributions. It's been a very illuminating conversation and equally as engaging discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This opportunity was such a privilege. I'm so utterly grateful to be able to have this dialogue with all of you. And just thank you to everyone who collaborated and who came. And I hope to have many more events like this in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we want to continue to give these types of events for as long as we're in a virtual context. We see no reason why not to continue with, you know, educational, conversational events.
Yes.
All right. Take care, everybody. Be
Have a
safe.
good night. Stay
Have
warm.
a great night.
Be safe.
Thank you so much to our guests.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bless you all.
Be healthy.
Yeah. Wear your masks.
Bye.
Bye.